Yes, we've already had a course launch, but what about second course launch? Another highly requested topic by you guys, not as much as Apex, but still, was a continuation of a short and sweet Blueprints 101 series, covering the Houdini-ish part of Unreal Engine. And since I've spent quite a bit of time learning Unreal last year, that's exactly what we're doing now. So in this first video, we're going to build our first Unreal setup, but I also quickly want to talk about the goals that I have for this course, or the general plan. And let's start with the goal. And the goal is, if you're someone coming from Houdini or blended geometry nodes, this course is about learning how to build similar setups in Unreal Engine. Because while blueprints inside Unreal Engine might look very much like blended geometry nodes or Houdini, they require a whole different way of thinking to actually get stuff done. You basically have to think like a game designer. And in this course, we want to learn how to think like that. As for the general structure of this course, this will be less like the structure of the courses that we launched in recent years, like our Houdini Beginner series or our Machine Learning 101 series, where we basically had a very strict structure and basically spent quite a few episodes building one giant setup. In this new series, this is much more like our older series, which basically means that we're going to spend 1 or 2 episodes on each setup, and our main goal is basically to have a bunch of opportunities to explore a bunch of different things and build a bunch of different setups inside Unreal. And these setups that we're going to build will be all sort of centered around this topic that I called interactive MoGraph. So imagine taking your typical MoGraph setups that you're going to build in Houdini or Blender and now making them interactive inside Unreal. And you could imagine having these running, say, on a storefront or in an exhibition or maybe as some music visualizer or something like that. This is of course not the only part where Unreal is interesting. There's of course the huge topics of virtual production or game design or real-time rendering, and there's also smaller topics within Unreal that are not blueprints like Houdini Engine or PCG or Niagara, Unreal's particle system. And I have a feeling that we're going to touch these topics in this course as well. But I also want to know what you guys are interested in and what this course might pivot to in the future. Again, interactive MoGraph is the start of this course, but again, it's quite a loose structure and can be quite open-ended. So I would love to hear feedback what you want to see there in the future. Let's finish by talking about the schedule. Today, on April 17th, we're launching 2 episodes. The one that you're watching right now, where we're going to build our starter project, our base project for all our new projects that will follow. And then we're actually going to start with the first project, which is the cell project that you already saw in the teaser. And the first part of that project will be published for free today here on YouTube. And the second part will be published 2 weeks from now on May 1st on our Patreon. And after that, it's our regular bi-weekly schedule with new projects, some of which you already also saw in the teaser. But this is all I want to tell you about this course for now. And now let's actually start with our first Unreal setup. So let's go. Hello and welcome to the very first video of a new Unreal series. In this video, we'll build not a finished setup, but a base project that we can use as a starting point for all future builds. Unreal is still a game engine after all, and by default, it really wants to make you control and navigate a 3D character through a 3D world. And we need our base setup to get something that's a bit more close to what we're used to from motion design. So I'm in my Epic Games launcher right here in the Unreal tab, and I'm using the latest version of the Unreal Engine right here. And to get started, I just want to click this launch button right here. And after a bit of waiting, we get this new window right here where we can select a base project. So for this, I want to go first of all to Games, and I want to use the blank project right here. Now on this side, we have some basic options that we can set up. First of all, we want to make sure that we have blueprints in here selected instead of C++. Then our target platform should pretty much always be the desktop, and our quality preset should pretty much always be maximum. And we also want to leave starter content in here unchecked, because this will just make our base project unnecessarily large. Now in some cases you might also see a ray tracing button or ray tracing checkbox down here. I, for some reason, even though I have an RTX card, don't see it here. Unreal sometimes works in mysterious ways. However, you can leave this unchecked as well. The basic engine, the basic lighting engine in Unreal Engine 5 Lumen is way more than we need for the project that we are going to build in here. And then finally, we can set a location, which in my case is on another drive, and a project name. And let's call this, in my case, I'm going to start this with rec, and let's call it mograph_base, like this. And also for the project name, you can't have any spaces in here, so I'm using underscores in here. So let's hit create. And again, we're going to wait for a bit for everything to compile. And after a bit of waiting, we're inside this default level right here. And we can take a look at the Unreal interface. So first of all, this is our 3D view in here. Right here is all the contents of the current level. And down here, all the properties, if we say select the ground in here. To navigate through the 3D view, we can, in that case, in case of Unreal, hit and hold the right mouse button and then just use WASD along with Q and E to fly through a level. This is more like your typical FPS game instead of your typical 3D program, but this is just something you have to get used to with Unreal. And also the last very important bit inside this view is the content drawer, and in here we can load in other objects, we can create new objects, create new levels, and this is also exactly what we want to do now. So first of all, in here I want to create some folders. I can do this either by right-clicking in here and selecting new folder, and I'm going to call my first one BP for blueprint. Let's make this a bit larger so we can see what we're doing. Or I can just use the Windows shortcut, so I can hit Ctrl-Shift-N, and I'm going to name the next one Geo for geometry, the next one Map for our levels or our maps, and then the final one Mat for our materials. Now we don't want to use this default level right here, we want to create our own, so let's first of all go into the map folder. Let's right click in here again and let's create a new level. And I think this interface is a bit large. Let's make it a bit smaller. Let's go to edit, editor preference, get this window right here. And let's maybe try an application scale of 0.75. And I think this is still quite readable for you. Again, let's bring this up, right click in here. Let's create a new level. And let's call this level simply base. And also, whenever we are naming stuff in Unreal, it's sort of a tradition to give everything that we build in here a prefix. In this case, I want to give it a prefix of map_base, like this. Let's double click this to get into our level. You may be prompted to save something, so let's select Save Selected. And now we're in a very black scene, which is our new level. So let's actually populate it with some stuff. First of all, I want to create some lights, and for this I want to go to Window and I want to look for the environment light mixer. So this is this thing right here. And all I want to do in here is basically hit some buttons. I want to create a skylight, I want to create a directional light, I want to create a sky atmosphere, and I want to create some height fog. Basically hit every button except create volumetric cloud, like this. I can close this window again, and now I have a nice environment set up. And also with my mouse in the editor, I can hit Ctrl L and I get this little widget right here where I can control the sun position and get some really nice colors. Let's also add some objects to the scene. So in here under this add menu, go to shapes, let's select plane in here. And let's take a look at the location here, if it's on 000, which right now it isn't. So let's just hit this reset button right here and move it to 000, like this. And now it's here in our level. Let's make it a lot bigger. Let's first of all lock the scale on all three axes and let's maybe scale it up by 10. Then I also want to bring in some objects, some demo objects for now, which will be some spheres. So let's add one sphere in here. Let's again reset the location. Let's move it up a bit. And let's copy it a total of 5 times. And I can simply do this by holding Alt on my keyboard and dragging. And let's drag this out again. And let's select all of them in our outliner up here and just move them to the center like this. Then, of course, in our scene, we also need a camera. So let's create this. Let's also go to an add menu in here to cinematics and let's select a cine camera actor like this. And let's move this to a very specific location. Let's set the location to -500, 500 and 500. And let's set the rotation to 0 and -37 and -45. And now we should have a somewhat nice view of our spheres in here. And finally, on my camera, I want to set one other setting. And I can find this by selecting the camera component, not the cine camera actor up here. And this will be the film bag, because right now this is set to a somewhat small film bag, and I can set this to 16:9 DSLR to get my typical full frame camera film bag. And of course I could also set a specific focal length, but I'm going to leave this at default for now. Now the final thing that I want to add to my scene in here is a post-process volume, because there are some quite important settings for us on here. So for this, let's again go to the add menu, let's go to volumes, and let's get a post-process volume like this. Let's again reset the location for this thing as well. And in here, again, I also want to set some specific settings. So in here, let's first of all search for unbound. Typically for post-process volume, all the effects that we're going to add to this or that we're going to set in this will just live inside this area right here. And by setting it to unbound, this will now be valid for the whole scene. And then I want to go to exposure. And I first of all want to set the metering mode, not to use auto exposure. I want to set a manual exposure. And the manual exposure right here is currently way too dim. So let's set this maybe to a value of 10. And I think this looks quite good. And now our exposure also does not change if we, for example, move to a very dark area. Next, let's clean our scene up a bit. We created a bunch of demo objects. So to make this a bit more neat, let's add a folder in here. Call this base as well. And let's move everything into this folder like this. And we can collapse it. And now this is all nice and tidy again as well. Next, I want to add some materials to my scene, some shaders. So for this, let's bring up the content drawer again. Let's move to a matte folder. And in here, first of all, I want to create a ground material. For this, I also prepared a texture that you can also find in the scene file downloads. And I want to simply drag this into my scene right here. And this is this BG grid. Now with this texture, I want to create a shader. So again, let's right click and create a new material, which is off screen currently. Let's try to make it on screen. Yeah, here, material. And let's start this with M and let's call it BG grid like this. And let's double click this and we should get a new window, a new node editor. Let's make it fit a view window as well like this. The material system will probably get its own tutorial video at some point. For now, the only thing that I want you to know, that I want you to care about in here is that as long as you're dealing with opaque materials where you just see the surface, you can't look into the material, this is pretty much your typical PBR shader. This works exactly the same as, say, the principal shader in Karma. So for my material here, I first of all want to bring in my texture as well. So this window in here has its own little content drawer and I can simply drag in my grid texture. And I could directly connect it to the base color, however I want to have a bit more control over the colors themselves. So first of all, I want to drag out from my base color in here. And I want to search for lerp, or linear interpolate. And I get this node right here, where I want to plug in the red channel of my texture into the alpha channel. And then I have this A and B channel where I want to set a color, or in this case, just a single float value. So this will be for my base color, a value of 0.75 or 0.75. We're working on an English or German version of the Unreal Engine, to a value of 1 like this. And this just makes it a bit brighter, a bit less contrasty. And then I also want to use the same thing for the roughness. I can simply hit Ctrl-C and V to get another lerp node. Again, I'm going to wire in the red channel. And in this case, I want to lerp between a value of 0.3 and 0.6. And this goes into the roughness like this. And finally, I want to control the scale of my texture on my object. And for this, I can right click and search for a text coordinate, texture coordinate like this. And I want to multiply this by some constant. So let's search for multiply. Let's multiply it by 5. And then let's plug this into the UV's input like this. And now we have some more divisions on our background grid. Let's hit apply and let's hit save. And let's minimize this window for now. And let's bring up our content drawer in here. And let's simply drag a material grid onto our plane in our viewport like this. And now we have, if you look very closely, we have this texture in here as well. Now the other material that I want to create is 5 accent colors, which will be the sort of corporate identity of this course, if you want to call it that. And for this I want to open the content drawer again, and I want to create a new material. And I want to call this M palette underscore base like this. And I want to double click this as well. Get the same material. And in here, I don't want to use any textures at all. I just want to set some basic options in here. I want to make it a bit less rough. Let's maybe try a value of 0.3. Yeah, this looks good to me. And then I also want to set a base color. And for this, I just want to set this to one solid color. And I can create this either by right-clicking and searching for color and getting the right option in here that I really never can remember. What I like to do instead is hold 4 on my keyboard and double click. And this will simply create a 4-float vector, which is a color with an alpha channel. And I have this nice little color picker in here. And I want to wire this into the base color. Now what I want to have for my accent colors is I want to have one master material where I could, for example, add some other textures to the roughness channel or the normal channel or something else. And then I want to have this change automatically applied to all my accent colors. So I don't have to do this change 5 times in a row. And there's a system with an Unreal Engine that allows me to do that. And this is called material instances. So what I need to do first in here is take this simple node in here and convert it to a parameter. And you can sort of think of this as, for example, promoting a parameter inside a WOP inside of Houdini, for example. So let's click convert to parameter here. Let's give it a name. Let's call it base color. And this is pretty much everything we want to do for this material right here. So let's hit save. Let's close this. Let's bring up our content drawer in here again. And now let's right click this material and let's select create material instance. And let's call this mi underscore palette underscore 01 like this. And if I double click this, we get this new material editor in here. And as you can see right here, this is quite a bit smaller, quite a bit reduced. And in here under the global vector parameter values, we have our base color, the one parameter that we created. So I can enable this and bring up the color picker. And now in here, I can enter, for example, a hex value to get this the correct color, which I'm going to do now. So this is my first accent color that I want to use. Let's paste it in here. Let's hit OK. And now we have this very, very light pinkish color. And I'm going to do the same thing for all my other 4 accent colors that I want to use for my projects in here. So let's hit save on this as well. And now let's do the same step for my times. And now I have my accent colors all set up. So first one, a second one, a third one, a fourth one, and a fifth one, like this. And now we can close this window again, bring up a content drawer in here, and just drag them onto our balls in here, like this. So finally, I want to make some changes to actually make this behave more like your typical render setup in Houdini. And to actually try that out, let's first of all hit this play button up here. And this is also the button that we're going to hit whenever we want to test our blueprints or see how our blueprints will behave in the end. Let's hit play right now. And right now we're in this sort of mode where we can freely fly through our scene right here, which is not what we want. We set our fixed cinema camera in here, and we also want to look just through our cinema camera whenever we hit play up here. We don't want to move through a level. So to do this, we actually want to build our first blueprint. And this will live up here in the level blueprint. There are a certain set of blueprints that we can use inside Unreal, and this is just one that works just for this main level in here. Let's click open level blueprint, and we have this node interface right here. Again, we will talk about that in more detail in a later video. For now, I want to just branch out from this event begin play. This simply gets executed once we hit this play button up here. And in here, I want to grab a specific node. That's called ZView target from blend. And by default, that does not show up, and it does not show up because we have context sensitive turned on up here. This will select just a subset of nodes in here to make this easier to find the correct one. However, in this case, this is not what we want. And it still does not show up. Let's see. It's not from blend, it's with blend. ZView target with blend, and now we have this node in here. Now we need to populate some of those inputs. First of all, this will be the target, and our target should be a player controller. The player controller is basically everything that we do as a player. So what we're looking out from, and also all the inputs that we might do to control our game. So I can simply drag out from there and search for get player controller and get this node right here. Then next I want to set the new view target, which will be my cinema camera. So let's make this a bit smaller. Let's search for a camera again. I'll simply drag this into here. And let's connect it up like this. And then let's make sure the blend time is set to 0, 0, so that we're just jumping to this new viewpoint as soon as we hit play. And this is all we need to do in here. So let's hit compile and also save. And if we now close this window and hit play again, we can see now that we're inside a view camera or a cinema camera. But there is something different in here, which is annoying, which is this sphere right here. And actually, if we click on a level and use WASD, we can actually see that we can move the sphere around, because this is actually currently our player. This is our player model where we can fly through a level. Of course, we also don't want to see this. We want to make it invisible. And this is what we're going to do next. So first of all, let's hit escape to jump out back to our editor like this. And finally, I want to set a few settings on my game mode or on my project. Let's hit edit in here. Let's go to project settings. And on this new window, I want to go to maps and modes like this. And first of all, I want to hit this little plus icon next to the game mode base. And in here, I want to navigate into my BP folder like this. And I want to give it a name. Let's call it BP_game mode. And hit save. Then I want to enlarge this right here. And I also want to change my default pawn class. The pawn class is the sphere that we saw earlier. And again, we want to replace it with our own little pawn that won't show up in the viewport. So hit this plus icon in here as well. Again, select our blueprints folder. And let's call it BP_pawn. And again, hit save. We can for now ignore this viewport that popped up right here. We can minimize this again. And the last thing that I want to do in here is also set our editor startup map, because it's currently set to the open world that we saw in the beginning. And I want to set my map base in here. And also the game default map. I also want to set this to my map base. And finally, one very last change that I want to do in here is I want to go up to the search. And I want to search for texture streaming. And find this option in here and simply disable it. This is just a performance thing for big open world games. However, for the small scenes that we're going to build, this is not necessary. This is just unnecessary complications. So we're just going to disable it. And now with all of this, we're actually done. We have our base project and can actually begin building our own little blueprint scenes inside Unreal. Let's close this window. Let's go to File, hit Save All. And then we're done in here and we can close out our editor window. So this is it for today. And until next time, it's cheers and goodbye.